airport had smelled like damp tile and too much perfume. A blend of unfamiliar languages buzzed around Ayana Brooks, but her headphones blocked it all out. She sat alone by the window at the Kunming terminal, forehead resting against the cool glass, eyes watching the gray sky tremble with the threat of rain. A woman in her early 30s, tall and composed even in sweatpants and a hoodie, Ayana looked like someone who had everything under control. She didn't. Grief sat beneath her ribs like a stone, constant and heavy. It's been 2 months since her mother left her world, and still, Ayana hadn't found the strength to unpack her apartment or respond to the condolences sitting unread in her inbox. Instead, she'd booked a one-way ticket to China. "Don't do anything reckless," her sister had said over the phone. "I'm not. I just need to breathe where nobody knows my name." So here she was, alone in a country she'd only studied in college, armed with beginner-level Mandarin, a good travel insurance plan, and a desperate desire to remember what her own soul sounded like. She'd signed up for the paragliding trek in Yunnan on impulse. It wasn't about adrenaline. It was about silence. She wanted the wind, the height, the stillness. She wanted a moment where the weight lifted, if only for a few minutes. The instructor's Mandarin was too fast, but the gestures were clear enough. Hold this, pull here, don't panic, just float. She nodded as if she understood more than she did. The sky opened like a dream as her feet left the mountain edge. Below her, rice terraces curved like emerald ribbons. Far off, the hills rolled into clouds. Ayana let go of the past, the grief, the ache. For one breathless moment, she was flying. Then everything turned. A sudden crack of thunder. Wind tore across the valley, violent and sharp. Her parachute shuddered, then twisted. No, no, no! Ayana yanked at the cords, but the sky spun too fast. Rain exploded from the heavens like bullets. She screamed, a ragged cry swallowed by the storm as her body spiraled down. Liang Rui did not believe in fate. He believed in plants. They didn't lie. They didn't manipulate. They bloomed or withered, depending on the care you gave them. And they never, ever fell from the sky. He had just finished checking on a cluster of endangered orchids deep in the forest when the storm came. He moved like a shadow through the trees, soaked to the bone but calm. Rain was an old friend. And then, something sharp and colorful crashed through the canopy ahead. He froze. His first thought, bird. Second, parachute. Then he saw her, unconscious, face cut, body twisted in the fabric of a mangled parachute, hair wild, soaking wet. The woman did not belong to the mountain. She looked like the storm that had fallen out of heaven. Rui's breath caught. He approached carefully. Her lips were parted slightly. Blood mixed with rain down her cheek. Her hands were scraped raw. "Alive?" he muttered, kneeling beside her. He reached for her pulse. It was there, faint but steady. "Ni shi shui." "Who are you?" She stirred at the sound of his voice, a weak gasp pushing past her lips. "Help," she whispered, eyes barely fluttering open. Her voice hit him like a match in the dark. English? She was foreign. He hesitated only a second more, then pulled off his raincoat and wrapped it around her as best he could. Lightning cracked overhead. He had no choice. With the rain soaking them both and her body limp against his chest, Liang Rui stood, lifting her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. As the wind howled through the trees, he carried her toward the only shelter he had, his hidden home deep within the forest. His jaw was clenched, his expression unreadable. He didn't speak again, but he didn't let go. The first thing she noticed was the scent. Not antiseptic, not plastic and bleach like the hospitals back home. but something warmer. Earthy, damp wood, and a hint of herbal tea. Her lashes fluttered open slowly. Everything blurred at first, then came into focus. An old wooden ceiling, rough-hewn beams, and thin golden light peeking through bamboo blinds. Ayana blinked, wincing at the tight pain along her ribs. A low rustle made her freeze. Her eyes darted across the room. A man sat at a low table, scribbling something in a weathered notebook. His face was angular and calm, his long sleeves rolled up, exposing strong forearms and a wristwatch with a cracked face. He looked like someone who never hurried, never spoke unless necessary. It wasn't a face she recognized. Her voice cracked like dry leaves. He didn't look up. She tried again. Where am I? That time, his eyes flicked to hers, dark and unreadable. You are safe, he said in clipped English, barely accented. She sat up too quickly. Pain screamed down her side and she gasped, hand clutching her ribs. Don't move, he said sharply in Mandarin. She didn't understand the words, but his tone was clear. I need my phone, she mumbled, patting around the mattress, panic rising. My phone. My passport. No phone, he said, standing. Wet. Broken. She stared at him, heart hammering. Wait, who are you? What is this place? Did someone send you? You fell, he interrupted, walking toward her. Storm. You nearly died. That stopped her. The memories returned like a punch to the chest. Wind, rain, a sharp scream. Falling. You found me? He nodded once. You were in forest. I brought you here. She studied him, her breath still shallow. He was tall, broad-shouldered but lean, with the kind of presence that didn't demand attention, but made it impossible to ignore. A faint scar curved just above his left eyebrow. Ayana tried to swing her legs over the side of the bed, but pain jolted through her again. Her right ankle refused to hold her weight. She collapsed back with a hiss of frustration. He didn't move to help her, just stood, arms crossed, watching. You could offer a hand, she muttered. I told you not to move. Yeah, well, I'm not great with being told what to do by strangers. He raised a brow. Then don't be a stranger. What's your name? She hesitated. Ayana Brooks. A short pause. Liang Rui. Rui, she echoed softly, letting the name settle on her tongue. Is this your house? He nodded. Where are we exactly? South Yunnan. Forest. Too far from main road. Ayana exhaled slowly, trying not to panic. No passport, no phone. She was a black woman alone in the middle of nowhere, with a strange Chinese man who barely spoke and looked at her like she was a puzzle he hadn't decided whether to solve or discard. She leaned back, eyes closed. Okay, God. This wasn't exactly the kind of silence I asked for. 8 years ago, the Beijing apartment was sterile, pristine, glass and marble, sunlight too bright. You are embarrassing the family, his father said, voice hard as steel. Rui, in a black suit that didn't quite fit right anymore, stood facing the floor-to-ceiling window. Below, the city pulsed with noise and ambition. I'm not your tool, he said quietly. You're my son, the elder Liang snapped. That is the same thing. Rui had turned then, anger simmering low and tight in his gut. You gave me your name, not your heart. He walked out that day. No goodbye, no second glance. He took only what he needed to disappear. Rui poured hot water into a chipped ceramic cup and placed it on the bedside table. Drink, he said simply. Ayana eyed it. What is it? Ginger. Helps with pain. Thanks. She reached for it. her fingers brushing his. He didn't flinch, neither did she. The silence that followed was thick, not uncomfortable, just new. Then she cleared her throat. Look, I appreciate you saving me, really, but I need to get to a phone. I have people waiting for me. Rui looked at her for a long moment. You won't make it far. Your ankle is sprained, ribs bruised. You can barely stand. I'll manage. You'll fall again. She swung her legs over the side once more, ignoring the ache. I've fallen before. That made something flicker across his expression. Something quiet, pained. She stood, just barely teetered, then gasped as her right leg gave out beneath her. Rui moved fast, catching her before she hit the ground. Her hand fisted in his shirt, breath shaky. Damn it! His arms were firm, his scent clean. Cedar, soil, and something faintly citrus. You're stubborn, he said lowly. She looked up at him. You're not exactly warm and fuzzy yourself. Their eyes locked, hers fierce and guarded, his calm but penetrating. I'll help you walk later, he said finally. You rest now. Ayana didn't answer. She let him lower her back onto the bed, pride bruised more than her body. As he turned to leave, she said quietly, Do you live out here alone? He paused. Yes. Why? He didn't turn back. Because some things grow better in silence. He said. It had rained again that morning. Not a violent storm this time, but a soft, steady fall like the earth exhaling. The kind of rain that didn't interrupt life but watered it. Ayana sat at the window of Rui's modest wooden home, sipping ginger tea. Her ankle was wrapped, elevated on a small stool, and her ribs still complained when she breathed too deep. But the bruises were fading, slowly. So was the fear. She hadn't expected to still be here. But each day Rui disappeared into the forest, and each night he returned with medicinal herbs, food, or water from the spring. He moved like someone who belonged to the wild. Every movement had purpose. Every word was rationed. And for some strange reason, the silence between them no longer felt cold. Later, that day, I want to go with you, she said to him. Rui looked up from the woven basket he was packing. His brows rose slightly. No. Ayana crossed her arms. I'm not made of glass. I can walk now. You limp. Your path is probably the safest place out here. What are you hiding up there? A secret lab? A wife? His mouth twitched, just slightly. No wife, he said, standing. No laboratory, just plants. Then let me see. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he gestured toward a walking stick leaning by the door. Keep up. They moved slowly along the forest trail. Rui barely looked back, but his pace stayed measured, always just far enough ahead to offer help if she stumbled, but never enough to embarrass her. Eventually, they reached a slope where wild ferns gave way to a clearing. Nestled in the curve of a hill was a greenhouse made of old wood and salvaged glass. It looked like something out of a storybook. Weathered, quiet, alive. Ayana's breath caught. You built this? Rui didn't answer. He just opened the door. Inside was a mosaic of green and color, rows of orchids, wild medicinal herbs, native peonies in every shade from blush to deep violet. Ivy draped lazily from the rafters. The air was thick with moisture and something ancient. Ayana stepped in carefully, awed. It smells like peace. He moved to a cluster of small plants with trembling white buds. This is Paphiopedilum micranthum, he said quietly. Endangered. Poachers try to sell them for profit. I've spent 5 years keeping this strain alive. Ayana crouched beside the pot, watching his fingers brush the leaf with reverence. "You love them," she said. "I respect them." "Same thing." He glanced at her, eyes unreadable. She sat on a wooden crate looking around. "Back home," she said after a beat, "I worked for an environmental justice group. We helped Black and brown communities fight toxic waste plants, illegal dumps, things nobody talks about." Rui looked at her, really looked. "You were an activist." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Still am, or was, until I burned out. My mom passed, and suddenly everything felt empty." He said nothing, but the silence was listening. Ayana stared down at her hands. She was strong. My mom, tough, beautiful, and loud in the best way. She could walk into a courtroom and make every man in there sit up straight. She paused, swallowing. "She left this world too soon. I thought I had more time. I thought..." Her voice cracked, and she shook her head. "After that, I couldn't breathe in that city anymore. I couldn't stand the noise, so I ran." "Still?" Rui said nothing. Then, after a moment, "Silence isn't always peace." She looked up. He stood beside a row of plum blossom seedlings. "I left my home because silence was all they gave me. My father speaks with power, but never with truth. My mother, she learned to disappear in a palace of noise. I stopped speaking when no one cared to hear." Ayana stared at him, moved. "You chose the mountain. I chose not to die inside." The words lingered like fog between them. For a moment, nothing stirred. The only sound was the hum of bees somewhere outside. Then Ayana said softly, "Maybe that's what we have in common." Rui turned his head. "We both buried something, and came here hoping it would stay buried." He didn't argue. She stood slowly, limping over to a table of potted plants. "You know what I see when I look at this place?" "What?" "A man who didn't disappear. Just bloomed somewhere no one thought to look." That time, he looked away, and Ayana didn't press. She just walked the rose slowly, breathing it in. Later, at dusk. As the sun dipped low behind the hills, Rui walked beside her down the path, steadying her when the trail dipped too sharply. "You still fight?" he asked suddenly. Ayana blinked. "What?" "For the world. You said you were an activist." She smiled faintly. "I'm trying to find a way back. Maybe not to the courtroom, but to the fire. The why." He nodded once. As they reached the house, Rui handed her a soft cloth with an herbal salve. "For your ribs." "Thank you." He opened the door but paused just before stepping in. "You speak too much. And you speak too little." This time, the smile that tugged at his lips wasn't hidden. "I'll teach you names of the plants tomorrow," he said. "Deal, but I'll keep asking questions." "Of course you will." The days had softened. Not the air. It still carried the crisp bite of the mountains, but the way time passed between them. Rui didn't hover or question her every movement anymore. Ayana didn't flinch at the silence. Their rhythms were starting to braid together in quiet, almost imperceptible ways. She was walking again, slowly, awkwardly, but walking. He was still silent, but no longer distant. And for the first time since crashing into his life, Ayana found herself smiling at nothing. At the way he lined his herbs by color, at how he hummed so faintly when he thought she wasn't listening, at the delicate care with which he cleaned a single cracked teacup as if it were porcelain treasure. In the kitchen, late one afternoon, "You chop like a surgeon," Ayana said, leaning on the counter as Rui diced spring onions with surgical precision. "Let me guess, you used to be a chef in another life?" Rui didn't look up. I cook to survive. Well, I cook to soothe, she said, reaching for a pot. Let me help. He paused, only briefly, then stepped aside, watching as she measured rice and added water. You don't rinse it? He asked. I like the starch, she said, then caught his frown. What? You're wrong, she grinned. Says the man who adds ginger to everything. He allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile. Ginger is survival. She raised a brow. You keep using that word like it's all life's about. Isn't it? She stared at him, quiet now. No. Sometimes it's about more. Rui looked down, adjusting the flame. More is dangerous. Ayana didn't respond. She just stirred the rice and added a dash of salt, enough to lift the flavor, not overwhelm it. Sometimes, the things that healed you didn't make noise. They simmered. It was Rui's idea to take her down the mountain. You need walking practice, he said. But why the market? You asked for fruit. That's not fair. I said if you were going into town. He handed her the walking stick. Then walk. They made it down slowly, the village appearing like a storybook nestled among mist and stone. The stairs started almost instantly. Children whispered. Old women frowned. Men paused mid-smoke. Ayana kept her chin high, posture steady, smile faint but present. She dealt with worse, but it didn't mean it didn't burn. Rui noticed, of course. His eyes tracked everything. The way people turned away from her, the way they nudged each other and muttered under breath. At the small outdoor market, while she inspected a bundle of lychees, a voice cut across the quiet like a blade. Hey Gui, the shopkeeper muttered under his breath. Ayana's body tensed. She didn't understand the words, but the tone, the disgust in it, was unmistakable. Rui froze. The shopkeeper added with a sneer, Foreign women bring nothing but trouble. Should have left her in the forest. Ayana straightened slowly. Rui, what did he say? But Rui was already stepping forward. Say it again, he said, his voice low, controlled, deadly. The man faltered. It's not your business. She's under my roof. That makes her my business. She's not one of us. She's more human than half this town, Rui snapped. Watch your mouth. The shopkeeper looked away, muttering curses under his breath. Ayana touched Rui's sleeve. Let's go. He didn't move for another breath. Then he turned to her. You okay? She nodded once. Let's go. They walked in silence for a long while, the bag of lychees forgotten in her hands. The path back to the forest had never felt so long. Back at the house, she didn't speak as they entered. He took off his shoes, lit the small fire, and washed his hands like always. Then Ayana turned and faced him, arms folded. Why do you live here? Rui looked at her, surprised. You know why? No, I know what you told me. You left your father. You hate his world. But this is hiding. His jaw flexed. I chose peace. You chose isolation. He didn't respond. She stepped closer. You protect endangered flowers, Rui, but you can't even protect your own heart. He met her eyes. And what about you? You ran from your life, too. I didn't hide. I broke, and I'm trying to put myself back together. Something cracked in his gaze. I know who I am, she said quietly, even when I'm grieving, even when I'm angry. Do you? A long silence fell. Then, softly, he said, No. That stopped her. She stepped forward, reaching for the teacup on the table. Her fingers brushed his. Rui didn't pull away. She didn't move either. The air shifted. It was the first time their bodies had shared space without conflict, without injury, just nearness. She looked up at him, her voice gentler now. "I'm not here to save you, but don't expect me to pretend you're fine." Rui nodded slowly. "I won't." Their fingers still touched. She didn't move. Neither did he. That night, they cooked side by side again, not in silence, but in something new, something beginning. The sun broke through the mountain mist like a promise. Ayana sat outside Rui's cabin, chin resting on her knees, arms wrapped around her legs. The forest hummed quietly behind her. Birds, rustling leaves, the sound of Rui moving methodically inside as he boiled water for tea. She didn't tell him about the call right away. Maybe it was selfish, maybe it was fear. The woman on the line had spoken too quickly, and Ayana had barely caught the keywords. "Your temporary visa expires in 30 days. You'll need to begin the renewal process immediately, or leave China." Leave. The word hadn't stung until now. She found Rui in the greenhouse. He was crouched near a narrow bed of red-veined foliage, gloved hands moving with delicate certainty. "Rui," she said softly. He looked up. She hesitated. "I got a call." He stood slowly, removing his gloves. "From home?" "No. Immigration." He waited. She exhaled. "I have 30 days left." His gaze didn't flinch, but something in his jaw hardened. "Then you have time." She blinked. "You're not surprised?" "I expected it." "I thought you'd say something else." "I don't waste breath on things I can't stop." She bristled. "So that's it? Just wait for time to run out?" "No," he said quietly, "but we don't lie to ourselves either." Something about his voice made her pause. It wasn't cold. It was resigned, wounded, in the way only people who'd once hoped too much could be. She folded her arms. "Why do you sound like someone who's already lost me?" He met her eyes. "Because everyone I've ever loved," he said, "was already halfway out the door." He didn't speak again until dusk. Just before the sun dipped behind the hills, he appeared at the cabin door. "Come with me." Ayana followed him through the forest trail without asking where they were going. Her ankle was almost fully healed now, her steps steadier, stronger. She noticed the way he moved ahead of her. Not too fast, not too far. They reached a high ridge she hadn't seen before. The forest parted and opened into a hidden clearing on the cliff's edge. And there, bathed in soft amber light, was a garden of peonies. Not cultivated, wild. They grew in irregular clusters, white and blush and soft lavender, petals trembling in the breeze. Ayana drew in a slow breath. This is sacred. Rui stepped into the garden without hesitation, running his fingers along a low stalk. They weren't supposed to bloom here. Too rocky. Not enough soil. Then why do they? Because I stayed long enough to learn what they needed. She knelt slowly beside one of the lavender ones, fingers gentle. "They're beautiful." "They're endangered," he said. "Poached, trampled, ignored. I found the seeds in a discarded bag 6 years ago. Nursed them in silence." She looked up at him, heart clenching. "Why do you keep saving things that are dying?" Rui looked at her. Not just at her, but into her. The quiet grief in her eyes. The edge in her voice that hinted at something deeper. Then he said softly, "Because they deserve a second chance." Her breath hitched. It wasn't about the peonies. It was about her and him and everything they weren't saying. She stood slowly. "Tell me the truth," she said. He didn't move. "Who were you before this place? Before the mountains?" He hesitated. For the first time since they met, truly hesitated. Then, Liang Rui, son of Liang Zemin, former Deputy Minister of Commerce. Ayana stared. Beijing? He nodded. My father was a weapon, the kind who didn't bleed. He built empires and crushed dissent. And when I started asking the wrong questions, about forced relocations, about bribes, he offered me a promotion. She was silent. I told him no, Rui said. So he made me disappear, not with violence, with silence. He erased my access, my work, my presence. Her voice was soft. That's why you came here. I didn't come to hide. I came to live without betrayal. And have you? He looked out across the peonies. Not until you fell out of the sky. A long, fragile silence bloomed between them. She took a slow step closer. Rui. But she couldn't finish the thought. He turned then, and something had changed in his eyes. No longer just distance, but risk, vulnerability, something raw and trembling and on the edge of wanting. I'll help you leave if you choose to, he said. And if I don't? Then stay, he whispered, as long as your heart lets you. Her fingers grazed his hand again, barely touching. But this time, it wasn't an accident. He didn't pull away. She didn't either. The moon hung low over the ridge, a quiet sentinel watching everything that dared to bloom after dark. The garden was sleeping, but Ayana was not. She stood just beyond the threshold of Rui's home, barefoot on the wooden steps, arms folded against the mountain breeze. Her curls stirred softly in the wind, and her thoughts were louder than the night around her. She could still hear his voice from earlier. Then stay, as long as your heart lets you. She wanted to believe it had been real, not just kindness, not pity, not a fragile moment mistaken for intimacy, but something more. Inside, Rui moved with silent deliberation, laying out the kettle, pouring hot water into the same chipped ceramic cup he used every night. He was steady in his ritual, even as his thoughts spiraled. She was leaving. Time was ticking. And yet she was still here. Couldn't sleep, Rui asked, stepping outside and holding out the tea. Ayana took it carefully, her fingers brushing his. Too quiet. He tilted his head. You've grown used to silence. Yes, but silence with you is different. A pause. He sat beside her, the wood creaking slightly beneath his weight. The air between them was charged, not with awkwardness, but something heavier, like gravity had turned personal. I've lived alone for years, he said after a while, but I didn't realize how loud it could feel. She looked at him, watching the moonlight paint his cheekbones, his jaw, the furrow of his brow. I didn't realize how afraid I was of soft things, she said. He turned to her. I've been angry for so long, she whispered. Angry at the world, at the way my mother died, at the way people like us always have to fight harder just to be heard. I know. You don't talk about it, she added, but I think you've been angry too. He didn't deny it, just nodded. The silence stretched again, intimate now, heavy with breath and possibility. Then slowly, carefully, she reached up and touched his face. His eyes fluttered shut at the touch. He leaned in, barely, but enough for her to feel it, to feel him. Their breath mingled in the cool night. Her hand remained near his cheek. His lips hovered just a breath from hers. The world quieted to a heartbeat. And then, Liang Rui, a voice, sharp, female. Rui's head snapped up. Ayana jerked back, startled. A woman stepped out from the shadows of the path, mid-30s, elegant in a travel-wrinkled trench coat, hair slicked back, posture rigid with command. Ayana froze. Rui stood slowly. Lian? His sister. Of course. Bajadao Le, she said in Mandarin. Father knows. Rui's face shifted. Just slightly. Enough for Ayana to see it. A flicker of something. Restrained. Controlled. How did you find me? He asked quietly. I followed the wire transfers. You've been too careful. Until recently. Her gaze flicked to Ayana. Something cool passed over her face. I didn't know you were entertaining. Ayana crossed her arms. I'm not furniture. You can talk to me. Lian arched a brow. Very well. Does she know who you really are? Enough, Rui said firmly. I came to warn you, Lian said. He's coming. Or worse, he'll send others. Let him, Rui said, voice low. This is bigger than you, or your project, or your guest. Her eyes lingered on Ayana again. You should have stayed hidden. Ayana felt the words like a slap. That night, she didn't speak as Rui walked her back inside. He didn't explain. She didn't ask. But later, as she packed a few things into her bag quietly, Rui stood in the doorway watching. You're not leaving tonight. I should. Why? She turned to him slowly. Because I don't want to be your liability, Rui. You're not. A foreign woman with a nearing visa expiration? Living in the cabin of a politically exiled son of Beijing's elite? She laughed bitterly. Sounds like a scandal in the making. I don't care. You should. He took a slow step forward. Don't do that. Do what? Push me away to protect me. I've lived behind walls long enough. I know what it feels like. Her breath caught. He kept walking until he was inches away. I'm not afraid of the consequences. I am, she whispered. For you. He reached up, gently brushing his thumb against her cheek. Ayana, I don't want you to go. Her eyes welled. You never say what you feel. I say it now. His voice was steady. Don't go. I don't want to leave, she admitted. But if I stay, this won't stay simple. His hand dropped to his side. It's never been simple. She stared at him, searching for the lie, but all she found was truth, raw and bare and beating between them. Something had changed, not said, but felt, and it wasn't going away. There was something about the stillness before a storm. It didn't announce itself with thunder or wind. No, it arrived in silence, too clean, too quiet. And that morning, the mountain felt breathless. Ayana felt it in her bones before anything happened. An ache that hummed beneath her ribs, like a warning. Rui hadn't said much since his sister left. He moved through his routines with practiced calm, but the tension lingered in the set of his shoulders. His tea went untouched. His tools lay in neat rows but unused. And every time she looked at him, he looked past her, as if bracing for something, as if he already knew. It happened one afternoon. The sound of heavy footsteps echoing up the trail. A sound out of place in the forest. Loud, purposeful, unnatural. Rui was already at the door before Ayana could react. Go inside, he said tightly. Rui! Now! 3 men emerged from the trees, dressed in civilian clothes that didn't bother pretending. One was built like a wall, another held a briefcase. The third, the leader, wore a watch more expensive than Ayana's rent back home. Liang Rui, the leader said, smooth Mandarin slipping like oil over a blade. Rui didn't flinch. I didn't invite you. No, but your father did. Ayana stood just behind the doorframe, hidden in the shadows, breath caught in her throat. She couldn't understand every word, but she understood tone. Threat? the kind that wrapped itself in politeness and still cut. "You've had your rebellion," the man continued. "It's time to come home." Rui's voice was ice. "No, you can't keep pretending you're a ghost. You're Liang Zemin's son. You belong to a world that doesn't allow disappearances. I left that world. You don't get to walk away. Not forever." "Then drag me," Rui said, stepping forward, "and tell him I fought." The men glanced at each other. It doesn't have to come to that, but it will, especially if you continue to be influenced. The pause was deliberate, by people who don't belong here. Ayana's heart clenched. They knew she was here. Rui didn't deny it. "She has nothing to do with this." The man smiled. "She has everything to do with this. He wants your obedience, alone, controlled. You gave up your seat at the table, Rui, but you're still his son. He will not tolerate a scandal." Rui's hands tightened at his sides. "She's not a scandal," he said. "She's not even Chinese." One of them said. "She's not my escape," Rui snapped. "She's the first person who made me want to stay. She gave me a reason to stop running. She made life something I wanted to show up for again." Ayana's breath hitched. The words crashed into her like a wave, beautiful and terrifying all at once. The man's smile faded. "We'll be back," he said simply, "and next time, we won't ask." They turned and walked back into the trees without another word. Rui stood outside for a long time after they were gone. Ayana didn't interrupt. When he finally came in, he didn't speak. He moved like a man who had just been unstitched. Quiet, careful, fragile. She touched his arm. "Rui, I'm fine." "No, you're not." He looked at her then. Really looked. "Do you regret staying here?" She shook her head. "No. Even if it ends like this?" "I just didn't know," she whispered, "that I'd be something used against you." "You're not." "I am. And we both know it." She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away, but he didn't hold on either. That night, he fell asleep sitting in his chair, head tilted back, jaw tense even in rest. Ayana watched him from the edge of the room, heart heavy. She had never felt more loved in her entire life than she had in these past weeks with Rui, and she had never felt more like a weight around someone else's neck. She rose before dawn. The greenhouse was quiet, the petals closed, the leaves bowed with dew. She moved through it slowly, carefully, the way he had taught her. Fingertips grazing leaf edges, breath soft as prayer. She found the lavender peony, the one that had survived against the odds, and pressed it gently between the pages of his notebook. No note, no explanation, just a flower he would recognize. A flower that had once been dying and bloomed anyway. She placed the notebook on his work table, folded her scarf, packed her bag in silence. And when she stepped out into the early morning mist, she didn't look back. Beijing's winter air had always felt sterile to Rui. Steel and glass and cold calculation. The skyline hadn't changed. Neither had the rules. The moment Rui stepped off the train, the city swallowed him whole. Horns blared. Faces moved with mechanical urgency. Billboards glared with hollow smiles, and none of it touched him. He moved like a shadow across its polished streets, jaw locked, coat collar high. The mountain silence was gone, but so was she. He stood before his father's office tower like a man walking into war. The glass rose in ruthless symmetry, flawless, unfeeling, expensive. He didn't bother using the elevator they'd once built for VIPs. He took the stairs. Every floor was a memory. Every hallway, a reminder of what he had once been expected to inherit. He didn't knock when he entered the office. Liang Zemin barely looked up. Ah, the prodigal. I'm not here to be welcomed, Rui said flatly. No, his father replied, still penning something with a fountain pen Rui had once seen used to sign contracts worth billions. You're here because she left. Rui didn't answer. His father leaned back, studying him. You think she did it for you? Isn't that noble? Romantic? But no, son. She left because people like her are smart. She knows this world eats softness. I didn't come here to talk about her, Rui said. Then why are you here? Because I'm done being used as a symbol of silence. You sent men to my door. You threatened the only thing I didn't want to lose. Zemin's eyes narrowed. That woman. She's your distraction. Rui met his gaze without flinching. Number, I disappeared long before she came. He stepped closer. She's not why I left. She's the reason I stopped hiding. She is my anchor. You think you love her? That emotion gives you the right to disgrace your bloodline? Rui's jaw tightened. Love is the only thing that's ever made me feel like I had a soul in this family. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was damning. Keep your legacy, Rui said coldly. I'm building something that doesn't rot from the inside out. And with that, he left. Washington, D.C., the office buzzed with fluorescent light and paper rustle. Phones rang. The smell of old coffee and recycled air clung to the walls. Ayanna sat in her corner office, surrounded by awards, files, and the vague ache of things she'd once fought for with fire. But now she was hollow. She'd stepped back into her life like someone putting on a coat that didn't fit anymore. She answered emails. She sat on panels. She led meetings on policy change and environmental injustice. But her mind wandered, to Rui's hands brushing the edges of dying petals, to his quiet voice naming wildflowers like scripture, to the pressed peony left between notebook pages as the only goodbye she could bear to offer. Her co-workers praised her strength. Her donors called her relentless. No one saw that she was grieving. It's been months since she left. Shanghai, China branch office. Rui wasn't even sure why he walked in. He didn't mean to. He was only in the city to meet a former colleague. But the logo on the glass caught his eye. Earth Equity International, East Asia branch. He entered without thinking, like a man sleepwalking through fate. The receptionist blinked when she saw him. Sir, may I help you? He hesitated. I'm looking for someone. Ayanna Brooks. She paused. She's no longer in China, but... Before she could finish, Rui's eyes caught on the table behind her. A pamphlet. A full-color report. Redlining the Sky, How Environmental Racism Displaces Indigenous and Rural Communities. Author, Ayanna Brooks. He picked it up slowly, fingers trembling. Her photo was on the back, a professional headshot. Calm, confident, beautiful. She had signed the foreword, "To those who think silence will protect them, it won't. Speak anyway." He sank into the nearest chair, and then he broke. Not loudly, not with sobs, but the kind of collapse that came from deep inside, his shoulders folding, breath shattering quietly as the pamphlet shook in his hands. She hadn't forgotten the mountain. She hadn't forgotten him. She had simply gone where the fight still needed her. And now he had to decide. Would he stay broken in a city of power? Or go to the one place where truth grew wild, like lavender peonies on a cliff? The auditorium was everything Rui hated. Polished marble floors, chandeliers mimicking daylight, politicians in tailored suits who smiled without their eyes. The Ministry of Economic Expansion had called the summit to showcase a new era of development partnerships. In truth, it was a smokescreen. They were greenlighting a series of projects that would displace over a dozen rural villages, including the one Rui had once helped protect near the Yunnan ridge. The same land Ayana had walked with him. The same trees she'd leaned against. The same soil beneath the garden she had touched. Rui stood behind the podium, eyes scanning the crowd. Cameras were on. Journalists were poised. His father sat in the front row, still and smiling like a man who thought he'd already won. But Rui didn't wear a suit. He wore a simple dark shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, like a man about to work. "Thank you," he began, voice clear and slow, "for allowing me to speak today." The silence in the room was immediate. Nobody expected Liang Rui to say anything. He'd been the ghost son, the quiet exile, the orchid keeper. He looked straight at his father. "I was told to endorse the new proposed land use contracts," Rui continued, "as a gesture of unity, of family continuity, of legacy." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the back. "I won't." The room shifted. Chairs squeaked. Heads turned. "My father's name carries weight in this room," Rui said, "and for years, I carried that weight in silence." His gaze sharpened. His voice dropped just enough to slice. "But a woman once told me that silence can be a betrayal." His throat tightened, but he didn't look away. "I'm done betraying what matters." He pulled a thin booklet from his pocket and held it up. A report. The same one he'd found at the Earth Equity Office. Redlining the sky, Ayana's name on the cover, her words printed across each page. "In this report," he said, "Ayana Brooks documents how marginalized communities, Black, Indigenous, rural, are displaced by progress dressed in suits. Her words do not whisper, they testify." He flipped to a highlighted page, and I quote, "When you remove people from their land, you don't just erase their homes, you erase their memory, their story, and their roots. Development without justice is not progress. It is theft." He looked out at the room again. "I stand with those villages. I stand against the silent theft of sacred spaces. And if that means I lose every ounce of privilege tied to my name, so be it." Gasps, flashbulbs, shifting feet. Rui took one breath, then another. "I won't be silent anymore." Ayana's tea had gone cold. The live stream on her laptop stuttered only once before continuing in full, crisp resolution. But she hadn't blinked once since it started. Her name, her report, her words. In his voice, on live television, "A woman once told me silence can be a betrayal." The screen blurred through her tears. He had remembered, not just the words, but the soul of them. He hadn't just quoted her. He had heard her. Her fingers pressed to her mouth. She stared at the screen, heart thundering. He had spoken when it cost him everything, and he had done it for what mattered, for truth, for justice, for her. The press exploded. Some outlets spun it as the reckless outburst of a disgraced heir. Others called him a whistleblower, a symbol of the new China, one no longer afraid to critique its own shadows. The village council that had been silenced for years received renewed attention. Aid offers followed. Environmental reports were reopened. And Rui? He walked out of the conference into the freezing Beijing air. No applause, no family, no safety net, but his spine was straighter than it had been in years. He didn't just walk away from his father's empire, he reclaimed his voice, and with it came the question he hadn't dared to ask. Was it too late to go back? To the place where love had once bloomed on a cliff edge? The winter sky over DC was clean and hard, painted in tones of resignation. Rui stood just outside the nonprofit's headquarters, scarf clutched in one hand, heart pounding against the shell of his chest. He had come this far. After the press conferences, after walking away from his father's shadow, after choosing voice over legacy. Now he stood in her city, on her soil, with one hope left beating in his chest like a war drum. Let me find her. Let me speak what I didn't. He entered the office quietly. The receptionist barely glanced up, until she did a double take, recognizing his face from the televised summit. "Excuse me," Rui said, voice thick from jet lag and fear. "I'm looking for Ayanna Brooks." The receptionist hesitated, sympathy blooming across her features. "She's gone." He blinked. Gone? "She left for Yunnan 3 days ago. Climate Restoration Initiative. Rural site visit." His mouth went dry. "Yunnan?" She nodded. "Back where she said it all started." The altitude hadn't changed, nor had the color of the sky at dawn, the way the clouds stretched like silk across the horizon. Rui climbed the winding trail with breathless purpose, the bag on his back bouncing with every step. It had taken a miracle of logistics and a few kind villagers to find the location of the site Ayanna had joined. She was somewhere near the ridge. That same ridge. His ridge. Their ridge. The same wild place where his heart had broken open for the first time. And now, maybe, it would mend in her hands again. He reached the curve just past the plum tree, the one she had once leaned against, teasing him for always adding ginger to everything. And then, like the moment was waiting for him, she appeared. She was standing on the trail, clipboard in one hand, her curls tucked beneath a head wrap, eyes trained on a plot of native vegetation. Her mouth moved as she spoke to a small team of volunteers. Her voice, warm, instructive, certain. His world slowed. She turned and saw him. Her entire body froze. Rui took a step forward. She didn't move. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. And then she whispered, "Rui." He exhaled, shaky and reverent. "I never thanked you," he said quietly, "for breaking me open." Her breath caught in her throat. "You didn't have to," she said. "I saw you bloom." He took another step forward, the mist curling between them like breathless memory. "I walked away from everything. The name, the legacy, the silence," he said. "And I kept thinking, what now? What am I without the world I hated?" She watched him, eyes wide, full of something too raw to speak. "And then I remembered," he whispered. "You once said, you broke, but you're trying to put yourself back together." He reached for her hand, barely touching, the way he had done once under lantern light and storm-drenched skies. "I want to do that too," he said, "with you." Ayanna blinked, and the tears spilled quietly. "You found me," she breathed. He gave her a soft, rueful smile. "I never stopped trying." They stood there, tangled in wind and memory, in something too sacred for crowds or cities to hold. The mountain had given them silence once. Now it gave them a beginning. Darker, days later, rain tapped gently on the roof of the greenhouse. Not the violent kind that tore through trees or knocked you out of the sky. This was softer, like a memory come to visit. Ayanna stood near the center of the room, watching Rui work. His hands were bare, dirt soft under his fingernails, sleeves rolled back the way he always did when he got serious about something. Only this time, he wasn't tending to a garden for himself. He was preparing something for her. "Are you going to tell me why you dragged me out here before breakfast?" she teased, her voice quiet and warm. Rui didn't answer right away. He stood up slowly and dusted off his palms. Then, he reached for a small clay pot on the shelf, cradling it like something sacred. Inside it was a single growing stalk, tender, unfurling. It wasn't just any plant. It was the one she had admired months ago, just before leaving. A pale lavender peony, grown from the same wild strain she touched on the cliff edge. Its leaves trembled, reaching up as if they remembered her hands. Ayanna gasped. "Is that—" "You said this one looked like hope," he said, stepping closer. "I took a cutting the day you left. I wasn't sure it would root." She stared down at the tiny blooming miracle. "I watered it every morning," Rui added, voice softer now. "Kept it under the warmer light. It didn't grow at first. I thought maybe I'd ruined it. Or maybe it just needed more time." He paused. "I think it was waiting for you." Ayanna looked up, and his eyes held hers, steady and sure. Then he did something he'd never done before. He dropped to one knee. Her breath caught. "Rui." "No ring," he said gently, "because this isn't a promise tied to gold. This is what I have. Something I grew. Something fragile. Something real." He held the plant out to her like it was a vow. "I don't want to love you in pieces anymore," he said. "Not from across oceans. Not in quiet corners. I want to be where you are, even if that means flying through storms to get to you." Her hand trembled as she reached for the pot. He didn't rise until she whispered, "Yes." And when he stood, she didn't wait for him to lean in. She kissed him, soft where certain. The kind of kiss that didn't demand anything, just returned what had already been given. 1 week later, the limousine pulled up to the Liang estate like an echo from a life Rui had already buried. But this time, he didn't come alone. Ayanna stepped out beside him, hair wrapped in soft fabric, her cream-colored dress simple but radiant. The air was colder here, but she stood tall, unapologetic, beautiful. "Are you ready?" she asked. "No," he said honestly, "but I'm doing it anyway." The house was still full of shadows, of servants who pretended not to stare, of rooms too wide and walls too quiet. They walked through them together. His father was waiting in the study. "You brought her," he said, without looking up from the glass of aged whiskey in his hand. "I didn't bring her," Rui replied calmly. "She chose to come." Zemin's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mockery of everything I built." "I'm building something else." "With her?" "With her," Rui said, "and with my own hands." Ayanna didn't speak. She didn't have to. She stood there like a storm in silk, steady, composed, fire in her spine. And for the first time in his life, Rui felt taller than the man who had once controlled his world. "You can choose to be proud," Rui added, "or you can choose to be silent. But I won't disappear again." He reached for Ayanna's hand. She took it. They turned. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't need it. Later, that night, the city glowed beneath them, 1,000 windows lit like fireflies. Rui sat beside her, his head resting lightly against hers. "This place still tries to make me forget who I am," he said. "But now you have someone to remind you," Ayanna murmured. He smiled. "We'll live in both places," she said. "DC and Yunnan. We'll straddle oceans like roots in two soils. You think we can do that?" "I know we can," she said, turning to him. "We already survived the storms." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, and in the background, the peony cutting sat on the table between them, its petals just beginning to open under city light. The field smelled of jasmine and rain-kissed earth. Yunnan's hills unfurled around them in endless green, terraced tea fields rolling like silk into the distance, dotted with blossoms that trembled in the warm breeze. Lanterns hung from trees on strings like stars waiting to descend. There was no marble aisle, no cathedral, no choir, only sky, only soil, only the people who mattered. Rui stood beneath a simple wooden archway wound with white peonies and plum branches, wearing a linen jacket the color of mountain stone, his collar slightly open, his hands bare and steady. He had never looked freer. Ayana emerged from the narrow trail just beyond the field. Her dress was soft ivory, hand-stitched by village seamstresses, with delicate embroidery of wild flora trailing up the hem. Orchids, plum, jasmine. Her curls were crowned with fresh lavender and tea blossom petals. Her head held high, her eyes glistening with the kind of peace that only grows where healing has lived. The children from the village school she helped fund walked ahead of her, laughing and dropping tea leaves instead of rose petals. Rui didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe, until she was standing right in front of him. His sister stood just behind the rows of woven chairs, arms crossed, blinking faster than usual. She had arrived quietly, without drama, and had offered Ayana a simple sentence backstage. "Thank you for bringing my brother back to the world." Ayana's father, a strong man with graying temples and a pastor's steadiness, had flown in 2 nights before. He now stood beside the officiant, holding a worn Bible in one hand and a bundle of black tea leaves in the other. The villagers gathered at the edges, murmuring blessings in soft dialects. The children held tiny paper flags, one red with gold stars, the other green and black. The colors didn't clash, they blended. The officiant asked if they would speak their own words. Rui turned first. He pulled a small page from his pocket, creased, slightly smudged, written in both Mandarin and English. His voice shook a little. "You fell from the sky, and I didn't know what to do with a miracle that came broken. But you didn't ask to be saved. You asked to be seen. You challenged me. You undid me. You taught me that silence is not peace. And now I vow to speak truth beside you, to grow what others said would never root, and to love you not only when the skies are kind, but when they storm, especially when they storm." Ayana couldn't stop the tears. Not this time. She took a breath and stepped closer, placing her hand over his heart. "I came here trying to run," she said softly, "trying to forget, to disappear in places where no one spoke my name. But somehow, in a land that didn't speak my language, you heard me. You held my sharp edges without flinching. And when I doubted everything, you stood still and let me come back to myself. So I vow to choose you again and again, across borders, between tongues. With both feet on the soil we now share." The silence that followed wasn't silence at all. It was reverence. A single gust of wind brushed through the trees, sending plum blossoms floating down around them like snow. The air shimmered with something old and sacred. The officiant nodded. "You may seal your vows." Rui smiled, small but certain, and leaned in. Their kiss was not rushed, not loud, but it was final, like roots gripping the earth after years of drifting. Later, as the sun dipped low and the fields glowed gold, they walked side by side down a narrow path between the rows of tea. There was no music playing, only laughter from children, the scent of green leaves, the murmur of a life finally blooming. Their hands were entwined, fingers laced with the kind of certainty storms could not erase. Ayana looked up at the sky, soft clouds drifting where she'd once fallen. And as the frame faded to dusk, her voice filled the space. Not loud, not boastful, just true. "I fell from the sky and found the only man who made me feel grounded." Years later, beneath the plum tree, Yunnan, spring. The laughter of a child floated through the warm air like music, light, wild, and bright with life. It skipped across the terraces, danced over jasmine vines, and wrapped around the plum tree that now stood taller, broader, its blossoms trembling like silk in the breeze. A little girl, 5 years old, curls wild and sun-kissed, darted barefoot across the garden stones. She wore a tunic her mother had stitched by hand, pockets full of tea leaves and flower petals. "Mama," she shouted, holding up a handful of plum blossoms, her fingers stained with crushed petals and joy. "They smell like you." Ayana sat beneath the plum tree, her dress loose and soft, one hand on her slightly swollen belly. Another child was coming, quiet and steady, like a seed already rooted in their love. She smiled, heart full, maybe because I carry spring in me too. The girl grinned, then ran off again, disappearing behind the greenhouse with the energy of someone who believed the world had no edges. Rui watched from the open doorway, arms folded, eyes soft. His hair was longer now, streaked with gray near his temples. His hands were still calloused, still tending plants, but his voice, his heart, had long since opened. He walked toward Ayana slowly and crouched beside her. In his hand, a small envelope, worn, folded once. "I found something," he said, brushing her cheek with a knuckle. "You wrote this 5 years ago." Her brows lifted. "I did?" "It was tucked in the pages of your first report, the one that brought you back here." He handed it to her. The letter, from Ayana to Rui. "To the man who met me where the sky broke. When I first crashed into your world, I didn't know I was looking for you. I thought I was looking for silence, for escape, for something quieter than grief. But I found you instead. You, with your silence that listened, your hands that healed, your garden where nothing was ever rushed but everything was sacred. I write this on the eve of our wedding because I want it said, somewhere, on paper, with ink that can't vanish, that I have never been more sure of anything in my life than I am of you. You are not a storm, Rui. You are the shelter, the soil, the root. And in you, I have found a home. Always, Ayana." Ayana folded the letter carefully, her throat tight. "You kept it," she whispered. "I kept everything," Rui said, pressing a kiss to her temple. The breeze shifted. Their daughter came running back, and her cheeks smudged with dirt. "Papa," she called, "tell me the story again, the one where Mama fell from the sky." Rui stood and scooped her up with ease. "Only if you promise to listen carefully. It's not just a story, it's our beginning." "And the ending?" she asked. He glanced at Ayana, eyes shining. "There's no ending, my little blossom," he said. "Just new seasons." The end.